At that time, we were looking at an invitation to join the ranks of the Warner Brothers group. One word: lazy.
In the smoky backrooms of Texas bars and under the neon glow of rock's wildest nights, Billy Gibbons built his legend, a bearded icon with a guitar tone thick enough to cut steel. But behind the charm and blues swagger lay a sharp tongue and a long memory. At 75, Gibbons finally opened up about the 5 artists he secretly couldn't stand. From a southern rock rival who crossed the line to a pop star who pushed him to the edge. These revelations expose the rivalries that shaped his legacy. 5. Garth Brooks. For Billy Gibbons, authenticity wasn't up for debate. It was the bloodline of every note he ever played. To him, blues wasn't a marketing tool or a style to be borrowed. It was life, something earned through sweat, heartbreak, and long nights in smoky bars. That's why, when Garth Brooks burst onto the scene in the early 90s with his slick cowboy hat and polished country blues image, Gibbons reportedly rolled his eyes so hard you could almost hear it from Houston. Brooks was the face of the new Nashville, arena-ready country, tailored for radio, television, and suburban living rooms. His songs carried hints of blues phrasing, but the soul was missing. To Gibbons, it was imitation without emotion. According to one Texas radio host who interviewed Billy in 1993, Gibbons dismissed the Nashville boom as the kind of blues you can spill on your boots without staining them. That line spread through music circles like wildfire. Fans laughed. Nashville didn't. The irony was, Brooks had often cited ZZ Top as an early influence. He admired their swagger, their southern flair, and how they blurred genres before anyone else dared. But when Brooks began mixing country pop with Texas blues flavors, Gibbons reportedly felt insulted. "That man's got all the polish, but none of the dust," he told a fellow guitarist backstage at a Dallas event. "He's playing barbecue sauce music, sweet, bottled, and good for TV." The tension came to a head at the 1991 American Music Awards, when Gibbons and Brooks found themselves in the same green room. Witnesses claimed Brooks, all charm and good humor, approached Gibbons with a handshake and a grin. "Man, I love your stuff," he said. Billy nodded, tight-lipped, and replied, "Glad to hear it. Don't wear it out." The air turned heavy. Brooks laughed it off, but those nearby said Gibbons didn't crack a smile. In subsequent discussions, Gibbons refrained from naming people, but his voice very clearly indicated whom he was talking about. He giggled when he was asked about the condition of contemporary country music and said, "There is country, and there is counterfeit country. Only one of the two has the odors of diesel and heartbreak." Connections were instantly made by the fans. The Nashville Pretender, a name the media gave Brooks later, had hit a nerve. The gap between them in terms of music could not have been more significant. On the one hand, Brooks was luring the crowds in with his power ballads, choreographed light shows, and all the effects that went along with them, while on the other, Gibbons still sought the purity of tone, a kind that came out from very old amplifiers and almost broken guitar strings. The huge success of Brooks was, so to speak, a Candy-Am Gibbons viewed the industry through: perfection instead of passion, shine instead of grit. "The blues are not supposed to sparkle," he said to Guitar World in 1994. "If it does, someone's selling it, not playing it." For Gibbons, Nashville's culturally driven approach was nothing short of heresy. The Music City had based its whole empire on the catchy song structures and the finessed studio techniques. That is, they had basically tamed the roughness of the Southern music, which made it so real. On the other hand, ZZ Top had always revolved around imperfections. Their grooves were oily, their riffs unpolished, and their sound distinctly human. Gibbons used to say jokingly, "Nashville songs smell like perfume, but the blues smell like sweat." It was more than a joke. It was a manifesto. There were rumors of badly interred emotions that lasted for quite a while. The time Brooks chose to release news of a roots blues album in the late 90s, a number of Nashville journalists mentioned that Gibbons had publicly turned down a comment. Nonetheless, it was gossiped that in private, Billy was very upset about the situation. "They're calling it blues again," he is said to have said to a friend. "It should be termed what it actually is, just marketing with a twang." In 2001, it was through Brooks that Gibbons was invited to be part of a live show, a so-called blues tribute for a TV special. Gibbons, with grace, declined the offer and delivered a now legendary remark: "The blues don't wear rhinestones." The statement managed to rally the establishment of blues aficionados who perceived the overstepping of Nashville as the extinction of artistic honesty. The name was printed on T-shirts by the fans. Brooks, as praised, never responded, although sources say that he felt the blow of criticism and was thus hurt. Gibbons wasn't fully attacking Brooks. He was just going along with the matter. For him, Garth was just the paradigm of the entire wrongdoers that had usurped the sound he liked. "It ain't that the man can't sing," Gibbons once said during the infrequent Open and Honest radio interview. "It's that he's singing about heartbreak with $1 million grin." That was the statement that characterized their philosophical difference, the undeclared conflict between authenticity and accessibility. In truth, both men represented two sides of the American dream. Brooks was the showman, mastering the art of connection through spectacle. Gibbons was the craftsman, staying loyal to the roots that made him. But in the eyes of the Texan bluesman, the road to truth didn't run through Music Row. It ran through sweat, dust, and heartbreak, not spotlight confetti. But while Garth Brooks's brand of polished country rubbed Gibbons the wrong way, the next betrayal hit closer to home for Stevie Ray Vaughan. In Texas, blues isn't just a genre, it's a blood oath. The players who come up through the smoky bars and backroom jams form a brotherhood built on respect, tone, and truth. That's what made the story of Billy Gibbons and Stevie Ray Vaughan so tragic. They weren't enemies at first. In fact, Stevie once called Billy his hero. But what began as admiration slowly turned into rivalry, and, according to those closest to Gibbons, a deep sense of betrayal that he carried for years. Their paths first crossed in the early 1970s, long before either man became a household name. Stevie, barely in his 20s, was the hungry kid hanging around Austin's music scene, studying Gibbons like scripture. "He used to sneak into our gigs and stand by the amps," Gibbons once recalled in an interview. "Didn't say much, just watched and learned. And learn he did." Stevie picked up Gibbons's heavy Texas shuffle, his searing tone, even his swagger. To Billy, it was flattering at first. By the early 1980s, Vaughan had exploded onto the national stage. His debut album, Texas Flood, wasn't just a hit, it was a declaration. The world was calling Stevie Ray Vaughan the new king of Texas blues. Magazine covers hailed him as the savior of the genre, a title that didn't sit well with Gibbons, who had been flying that flag for 2 decades. He didn't like hearing people say Stevie brought Texas blues to the world, said ZZ Top's former engineer Joe Hardy. Billy felt like he'd been doing that since before Stevie even had a guitar. The initial signs of friction showed up in 1984 when a journalist posed the question to Gibbons regarding his opinion on Stevie's ascent. The ever-cool for the shades Gibbons said, "The kid can play." However, the ones who were close to him revealed that his tone was more icy than amiable. It was reported that Gibbons, on the other hand, was complaining that Stevens' tone was a little too close, particularly the powerful, dense sound that Vaughan produced with his Stratocaster and Tube Screamer combo. This rig setup was almost identical to Billy's own rig years before, which partly explains the complaint. The situation grew worse when the management of Stevie reportedly asked for guidance from Bill Ham, the producer of ZZ Top, to help Steven find a suitable studio. "Billy felt that was a line crossed," an old roadie said. "He told me, 'That kid is not only getting into my territory, he is also trying to use my boots.'" Gibbons, the man who always supported the new generations of musicians, became mute when it came to Vaughan. In his interviews, he usually counteracted Flat's praise until the last moment when he was pressed to remission or taking the other position. And even then, His replies were short, hesitant, and impeccably polite, as if he were colder than openly critical. The tension finally exploded during the 1985 Montreux Jazz Festival, to which both artists were invited. Gibbons had been on the festival's wish list for decades, while Stevie was still trying to get international recognition after being booed there in '82. One backstage story said that Stevie came up to Billy and told him that he was his inspiration. Gibbons is said to have nodded, given a thin smile, and replied, "You learned fast." After that, he simply walked off. The nearly unnoticed transaction became part of Texas blues folklore. However, its remarkable shortness. Besides, there was quite a lot of talk about a studio session that was never to be realized. Stevie was the one who wanted to record the dual guitar jam with Gibbons, a symbolic passing of the torch, but he had to decline due to scheduling conflicts. Insiders say that he told his friends privately, "I don't pass the torch to someone who's already got my flame." It was not hatred in a strict sense. Rather, it was pride and the sharpness of seeing a student who was already teaching in the public eye. Soul to Soul managed to reach the charts in 1985, which critics already called Vaughan the heir to Hendrix. At the same time, the band ZZ Top was enjoying their MTV-era hits, which were lavish, synth-tinged, and pretty much the opposite of the stripped-down blues that had put them on the map. This scenario was hotly debated by fans who kept asking about the meaning of real Texas music. "That drove Billy crazy," said a longtime friend. He admired Stevie's talent, but he loathed the way people used him as a yardstick to measure against ZZ Top. Nevertheless, no matter the envy and bitterness, Gibbons never spoke ill of Vaughan. In 1990, Stevie suffered a fatal accident, and Gibbons was among the first to release a statement. He was a brother in tone, and Texas lost its best. Words like these, coming from a rock star, might have been perceived as sincere by the fans and untrue by those who were near him, but still, they were saying that Billy was tortured for many years afterward, not only by the loss, but also by everything that was left unsaid. "He never got closure," said Hardy. "He wanted to show Stevie how much he esteemed him, but he also wanted to tell him to back off. Now he could never do that." Gibbons had shown his respect in quiet manners for those years to come. During numerous ZZ Top gigs in the 1990s, he would sometimes add little pieces from Pride and Joy or Texas Flood into his solos, giving a silent acknowledgement to the one who had previously idolized him, and then came the rivalry. But notwithstanding, those gestures were still bittersweet and had the same effect of mourning the dead. Billy didn't hate Stevie, a Texas musician said. He hated what they had gone through. That soul connection which existed between the two of them, and time was not even needed for communication. But if the rivalry with Stevie Ray Vaughan tested Gibbons' pride, this next artist shattered his patience. 3. Lynyrd Skynyrd's Ronnie Van Zant. For most fans, the thought of ZZ Top and Lynyrd Skynyrd feuding sounds impossible. Two Southern powerhouses built on the same foundation of grit, guitars, and whiskey-soaked rebellion. But behind the curtain of smoky stages and roaring crowds, things weren't so harmonious. Billy Gibbons and Ronnie Van Zant might have shared a love for the South, but they clashed over something much deeper: the soul of Southern rock itself. And when egos collided on the road, that brotherhood turned into a battlefield. The story began in 1974, when ZZ Top's Tres Hombres was still climbing the charts, and Skynyrd was skyrocketing off the success of Sweet Home Alabama. Promoters dreamed of a joint tour, two titans representing Texas and Florida, uniting the South under one roaring banner of guitars. On paper, it was perfect. In practice, it was chaos waiting to happen. "They were like oil and gasoline," said a tour manager who worked for both bands. Billy wanted control, precision, groove. Ronnie wanted fire, sweat, and whiskey on stage. They were both right, and both stubborn. At first, Gibbons admired Van Zant's swagger. Ronnie was raw and fearless, the kind of frontman who could command 10,000 people with a grin and a beer in hand. But to Billy, that same bravado often crossed into recklessness. During early tour rehearsals, Van Zant reportedly showed up late or drunk, while the rest of the crew waited. Billy ran a tight ship, said sound engineer Terry Manning. He didn't tolerate chaos. Ronnie was in chaos. The first true explosion took place when the band conducted a rehearsal in Birmingham. The crew of ZZ Top had prepared the stage for a sound check, but they were surprised to find that the equipment of Skynyrd was already occupying the whole stage already. When Billy came face to face with the other band's manager, Ronnie himself intervened. "You guys from Texas think you have the blues," he said in a very sarcastic tone. "We are just playing it down here." The atmosphere was so tense that it could be cut with a guitar pick. Billy, who always kept his cool, simply smiled and replied, "Then try playing it in tune." The insult was very effective, and from then on the respect was no more. The performance, however, continued, but not without difficulty. The tour had gained a bad reputation for constant on-stage competition between the two bands. Ronnie and Billy were fighting for the attention of the audience, extending their solos, turning up their amps higher, and exchanging insults that they treated as joking. One night in Atlanta, Van Zant is said to have told the audience, "We are the real sound of the South, not some Hollywood cowboys with cheap sunglasses." The crowd went wild. Behind the stage, Gibbons was fuming, yet he looked calm. "He's selling beer," he whispered to a roadie, "not music." Jacksonville, Skynyrd's native town, turned out to be the breaking point. The local band was to close the night, while ZZ Top, who were originally headliners, would still have to take second place. Gibbons gave his blessing for the switch, but by that time, he was already very irritable. Witnesses claim that he uttered to Ronnie that night, "Don't mistake loud for legendary." Ronnie is said to have replied, "Don't mistake clean for cool." The tension that had built up that night broke. Thus, due to the extension of Skynyrd's performance, ZZ Top had to get only a portion of their time. Gibbons, as the lights went down, unplugged his guitar, said nothing, and marched straight to the tour bus. The very next day, ZZ Top withdrew from the tour. For a long time, the two guys did not talk about the incident. However, the rivalry left a mark on both sides. People who liked Skynyrd considered ZZ Top to be very arrogant. For supporters of ZZ Top, Skynyrd was just unprofessional. One of the questions posed to Gibbons during a 1980s interview was about the incident, and he responded very wisely. "Sometimes you jam with brothers, sometimes with bandits. You figure out which is which pretty quickly." Many took that as his indirect shot at Van Zant. Ronnie, on the other hand, was not one to retreat. He was interviewed in 1976, just a few months before his death. While being asked if he respected ZZ Top, he just smiled and said, "They are good guys, pretty much clean, maybe even too clean." The rivalry, however, never publicly declared as a full-blown feud, turned out to be one of those whispered legends in the rock community. Two alpha males of Southern rock, engaging in a dance of lions, each knowing that the other was not going to surrender. Gibbons's reactions after the tragedy of 1977 plane crash that took Van Zant's life were reportedly mixed. But if Ronnie Van Zant tested Billy's patience on stage, his next rival would provoke something deeper. 2. Kid Rock. By the time Kid Rock swaggered onto the national stage in the late 1990s, Billy Gibbons had already seen every kind of musical trend come and go. From disco to glam to grunge, none of it ever shook him. But there was something about Kid Rock, that brash blend of Southern swagger, hip-hop cadence, and arena rock ego, that rubbed Gibbons the wrong way from the start. It wasn't just the sound, it was the attitude. Here was a man who built a brand on Southern rebellion and called it authenticity, while the real bluesmen of the South were still grinding it out in small bars and juke joints. To Gibbons, it felt like watching someone wear a stolen jacket, one that didn't quite fit. "He's got the hat, the flag, and the fire," Gibbons reportedly told a friend, but not the story. What made it sting worse was Kid Rock's public admiration for ZZ Top. In interviews, he often cited Billy as an influence, even naming LaGrange and Sharp-Dressed Man as songs that taught him how to be cool.
When Kid Rock teamed up with Sheryl Crow for his song Collide last year, he was showing just one of his many talents.
Gibbons didn't appreciate the compliment. As one longtime crew member put it, Billy felt like Kid Rock wasn't inspired. He was imitating, and poorly at that. The first spark of tension came at the 1999 MTV Europe Music Awards, where both artists were invited to perform. Backstage, Kid Rock, ever the showman, approached Gibbons with his usual cocky grin and said, "Man, we should do something together." The old dog and the new school Gibbons, polite but unimpressed, reportedly replied, "Dogs don't bark with echoes." It was a line so smooth and cold that even Kid Rock didn't know how to respond. But what really lit the fuse came years later, at the 2003 CMT Awards. Kid Rock, by then trying to reinvent himself as a country outlaw, took a jab at the old guard during his acceptance speech, saying, "Some of these old guys in cowboy hats think rock and country belong in separate bars. I say buy the bar and play both." The camera caught Gibbons in the audience, expressionless behind his dark glasses. After the show, reporters swore they overheard him mutter, "That boy confuses volume with value." Gibbons's silent contempt revealed itself more and more during the interviews. To the question about new Southern rock hybrids, he spoke in riddles. "Some people make music with the heart. Some others have algorithms as their audience." Everybody, including the fans and the press, was quite aware of the person he was talking about. The remark became a topic of discussion among the purists, and the old guard's cry for real Southern blues music, which is to be understood as the music that is made from the suffering, not the social networks, was refreshed. On the other hand, industry insiders say that Kid Rock's management was in touch several times, looking for a collaboration and offering a variety of crossover plans, from a guest appearance on a remix to a joint tour that would be the American Rock Heritage Celebration. Gibbons turned down every single one of them, most of the time with one-liners that could very well serve as tombstones. "The blues don't need Wi-Fi. Some songs ain't meant for filters. I don't do digital." The man had a skill of saying no that went deeper than any yes could ever go. The irony was that Kid Rock, at least publicly, never ceased to show respect. He frequently referred to ZZ Top as the real deal in interviews, and even asked Gibbons to take part in a music video. Gibbons once more turned down the offer, telling him he was busy polishing his tone. But when Kid Rock came out with Born Free in 2010, an album filled with Southern imagery, slide guitar, and faux blues grit, Gibbons was said to have reached his limit. He confided in a buddy, "He's selling BBQ without realizing he has to start the fire." The break came in 2013 at a charity concert in Nashville. Both musicians were there, and the organizers set up a group jam for the end night.
When Kid Rock teamed up with Sheryl Crow for his song Collide last year.
When Kid Rock came in the middle of the song, shouting over the band with his usual confidence, Gibbons stopped playing. The moment captured the entire audience. When the song finished, Billy bowed his head, turned, and walked off the stage silently. A camera caught him whispering to the drummer, "That's not music, that's karaoke with an accent." The whole matter was very soon turned into celebrity gossip. Kid Rock did not take the matter too seriously, and he was heard saying, "Billy is a famous musician. He is allowed to express his dislike for anything that he wants." On the other hand, Gibbons never spoke about it. However, not too late after that, the band had their new album named La Futura, which was called Stripped Down and Raw to the band. A not-so-subtle statement that the blues didn't need to be modernized, only remembered. But if Kid Rock's showboating tested Gibbons's patience with the modern world, this last feud cut to the bone. A clash not with a pretender, but with a peer. 1. Eric Clapton. Among the many rivalries whispered about in rock history, few carried the quiet tension and mutual respect that marked the uneasy relationship between Billy Gibbons and Eric Clapton. On the surface, they were peers, two guitar titans cut from the same cloth, both disciples of the blues masters who came before them. But beneath the respect ran a current of competition, jealousy, and philosophical divide. Clapton was the gentleman scholar of the blues, polished and precise. Gibbons was the outlaw preacher, raw and unapologetic. And when those worlds collided, sparks flew. Their story began in the late 1960s, when Clapton was already being hailed as God by fans scrawling graffiti on London walls, while Gibbons was still clawing his way out of Texas roadhouses with a tone that could melt metal. Gibbons admired Clapton's technique, but never his restraint. "Clapton plays with gloves," Billy reportedly told a friend during the early ZZ Top days. "I play with scars." It wasn't an insult so much as a statement of difference. Clapton's blues came from study. Billy's came from survival. Their first meeting came in 1973 at the Montreux Jazz Festival, where both men shared a bill. Clapton, ever the consummate professional, approached Gibbons with warmth and curiosity, praising Tres Hombres and its breakout hit La Grange. Billy, polite but guarded, thanked him. But according to crew members who witnessed the exchange, the conversation quickly turned awkward when Clapton jokingly asked, "So how much distortion do you hide behind?" Billy smiled and said, "Enough to make it feel like the real thing." The air went cold. The contrasting styles of the two musicians, as well as their egos, could not be more striking. For Clapton, the blues were all about purity, traditional 12-bar structure, and the emotional nuance of the early Delta blues. In contrast, Gibbons envisioned evolution, and he was willing to go so far as to make those traditions scream. To him, Clapton's way of playing was like a safe, sterile, academic approach to the blues. "The blues ain't supposed to sit in a museum," Billy once said in a radio interview in 1980. "They're supposed to spill their drinks on your shoes." People in the know then hinted that the quote was a not very subtle reference to Clapton, whose concerts, while technically perfect, were frequently described as cold and lacking in fire. The conflict became most apparent during the year 1979, when Clapton personally invited Gibbons to an impromptu session of jamming at the Olympic Studios of London, a casual get-together of the blues greats, such as Albert Lee and Gary Brooker, to mention a few. Initially, the night was quite friendly, with Billy having a soft warm-up in one corner while Clapton was leading the session in the middle. But the moment Gibbons hooked up his Les Paul and made a screamingly loud solo with strong Texas influence, the whole thing changed. Clapton's face got tighter, one of the people who were there remembered. Billy was very loud, loose, playing with a lot of energy as a man possessed. Eric simply silenced himself and listened to Billy's noise, but in a rather unhappy way. After that, the jam was finished suddenly. Clapton is said to have left the stage very early, grumbling something about too much fuzz, not enough feeling. Publicly, the two men were polite to each other, but their rivalry went on becoming stronger in private. Clapton's admirers frequently praised him more than Gibbons, labeling Billy too showy or too brute. On the contrary, Gibbons's supporters referred to Clapton as the blues teacher. In an interview in 1985, Billy was asked about it, and he just smiled and said, "I have a high opinion of the man, but if the blues are a fire, he's got the place next to the fireplace. I'm still in the flames." That quote not only made headlines in Rolling Stone, but also made Clapton, who was sensitive to criticism, lose his temper, it was reported. The silent conflict moved forward in the early 1990s when Clapton held his Blues Nights concerts at London's Royal Albert Hall. Gibbons got an invitation but refused, giving tour commitments as a reason. He, however, confided in a friend, "There's no use in turning blues into ballroom." Clapton took the note as a personal insult, reportedly telling another musician, "Billy has forgotten that the blues have class." The exchanges continued in the form of indirect insults during interviews, both men too proud to mention the other, but also too honest to conceal their contempt. Billy Gibbons didn't just hate. He cared enough about music to defend it, even if it made enemies. His list wasn't about jealousy. It was about preserving the raw heart of the blues. These 5 feuds reveal a man unafraid to speak his truth, no matter how much noise it made. Which rival surprised you most? Let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button if you respect real talk in rock. And don't miss our next video diving into another untold legend of music history.